Welcome to the Art of Likeability, where you learn the secrets to becoming more likable in all areas of your life. Increasing your likability improves your relationships, and improved relationships increases your success in all areas of your life. Let's jump in with your host, Arel Moody.
What's going on, Art of Likeability family? Arel Moody here, host of your favorite podcast. I'm hoping it's your favorite podcast, because why else would you be listening to us? The Art of Likeability, where we teach you how to build your likability so you can build your relationships to build success. And success and happiness is what our goal is. And if you don't want success and happiness, why are you listening? This is the wrong podcast. Go do something else, baby. Well, I'm excited today. We have a special guest. We're going to be doing one of our long form interview formats, which I'm very excited about. We have someone who is a serial entrepreneur and professional athlete. His name is R. Michael Anderson, and the guy's got an amazing story. He had some ups, he had some downs. He unfortunately had a down where he hit divorce, lawsuits, alcohol and drug-related problems, and really had nowhere to go but up. And from there, he decided to take over and take control of his life, improve himself. He actually earned a master's degree in spiritual psychology, which we definitely have to jump in to find out more, because that sounds extremely fascinating. So he's now driven to take his experiences and his goals and his pillars of life and help others become more successful by teaching tools to focus on the most important relationships anyone has, and that's the relationship we have with ourselves. He's got a new book out called The Experiment, and it's become a bestseller. So I'm excited to jump in and find out more about Michael, find out more about his pillars, and see how we can improve our likability. Michael, are you there, my friend?
Absolutely, Arel, here and ready.
Well, we're excited about it. So, for a lot of people who may not know who you are yet, and they're just getting introduced to you today, if I were to say to you, hey, Michael, who are you? What's your story? Where did you come from? And why should I listen to you right now? What would you say?
Well, I'm just like everybody else. I'm just trying to do the best I can. And for me, I've always been good at the scoreboard of life. I played semi-pro basketball. I'm well educated. I was successful in business, but I never found joy and happiness when I was trying to achieve. So I was good. I was checking stuff off my scoreboard of life, but I looked and I looked at my life. I reflected, and I just didn't have any internal joy and fulfillment, any of that contentment, and that brought me to the spiritual psychology, and it was a life-changing event for me. It's a master's degree at the best place on earth to becoming happier. And as I'm sure we'll talk about, the happier we are inside and the happier we are with ourselves, the more likable we are, the deeper our relationships, the more people trust us, and just the better life goes.
That's so true. There's an amazing energy of someone who you can tell they're totally digging life and they're totally happy with who they are. There's a level of depth that a person like that exudes, that someone who's doing all the right things and everything they should on the outside just can never possess. And I'm so excited to learn about what does it take to get into that deep place, and how does someone create that likability. I know we have 3 pillars that you want to share with us that you help teach in your book, The Experiment, and you do in your speaking engagements about creativity and business leadership. So I'm excited to jump in. So, all right, let's say I'm someone that doesn't have a lot. I'm just getting started, or maybe I have a little bit, but I'm not happy with it. How do I get over not having that place of content or success or satisfaction with my life? Like, I have this desire for more on what you call the scoreboard for life, but how do I get over that so I can find that internal peace? How does that start?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And as we're going through this, we're going to talk about a lot of life changes you can make. And in your great podcast, Arel, you talk about life changes. And the reason the book's called The Experiment, and I just want to explain that, is when we make changes in our lives, if we call them experiments, they're a lot easier to make the changes. So when I share some things that work for me, some things that work for any other people that I work with, they may or may not work for you. And that's fine. And so what I really encourage people to do is listen to this podcast, listen to the other podcasts. What makes sense, try it as an experiment in your life. So if I tell you to do something or this worked for me, it may work for you. You're like, man, that sounds interesting, but I don't know if I can commit to doing that for the rest of your life. You don't have to commit to doing that for the rest of your life. Try it in your next phone call. Try it for the next day, the next week, and just to play with it, experiment with it, because changes are sometimes difficult. So before we get into the specifics around, I just wanted to throw out there this really easy, fun way to look at changes in our lives, because it makes it much more accessible.
Well, I think that something is so powerful, and I want to make sure that we don't just say, oh, it's splitting hairs, or it's just this or that. The power of language is something I'm a big advocate of. And when you say something like experiment, I love, like, as soon as you said it, I just felt myself resonating, because that makes sense. It's like I one of the things that I started doing is I stopped using the word problems in my life. I don't say I have a problem or there's a problem. I say I have a challenge, because a challenge seems like something I can overcome. A challenge seems like something I'm willing and ready to take on. But a problem has a negative connotation. So if we can get over ourselves and focus on a simple change of how we use language to change our life, it's a really exciting concept. So I love the fact that you shared that idea about using the word experiment.
Yeah, it is the word, and it takes the pressure off. And I'll give you an example. So a friend of mine, Nancy, she called me up and she said, hey, I want to, she called me up crying. And I said, Nancy, why are you crying? She goes, well, I just told that I'm allergic to wheat, so I'm gluten intolerant.
Yeah.
So it's an allergy, which some people have nowadays, are finding out they have. And she goes, I'm crying because I eat, bagels for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, pasta for dinner. How am I going to change every meal I eat for the rest of my life? That's really intimidating to me, and I just don't know if I can handle that right now. I said, Nancy, I hear this is hard, but you don't have to change every meal you eat for the rest of your life. She said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, why don't you try an experiment? For the next 24 hours, can you not eat wheat? So let's not worry about the rest of your life. For the next 3 meals, can you find something else to eat besides bread and pasta and all that other stuff? She's like, yeah, I can handle 24 hours. I said, well, okay. So don't worry about the rest of your life. Try some things for the next day, and then we'll check in. And then after we checked in after that day, she's like, hey, that really wasn't that bad. Here's some things I learned, because that's what we do in experiment. I learned I can eat, fruit for breakfast, but I still need a better thing than whatever for lunch. But it was just much more accessible. It was easier. And so when we talk about these changes, if I throw something out, Arel throws something out, whoever throws something out, just think, this isn't something you have to change your whole life. You just have to change, just try it and play with it and experiment with it and see if it works for you or not.
Right. Totally. Yeah. That just is, I'm actually I'm sitting here smiling because I'm thinking about, man, that just makes so much sense to me. So, all right. So I'm sitting here and I'm saying to myself, all right, I'm feeling inquisitive. I'm feeling like making some experiments. And, I am, again, in that place where I don't have all these things that I should want, and I don't have the money that I want, or, I had money and everything was going good. Then this thing out of nowhere came and made my day poopy. What are some experiments that you would recommend someone start with to really get to that deeper level?
Well, great question. This is something that I had to go through. It took me a lot of years to learn this. And when I was back in my achievement days, I really worked to show up and never show weakness and always make it. I worked really hard to put on this shell that everything was working perfectly in my life. And that's a very difficult way to go through life for a lot of reasons. One is it takes a lot of energy to do it. Second, it's not true. And what I really learned that people have very good intuition. And I think people know what I mean by intuition. It's like that gut feeling. So when people meet other people, they really are in tune with their intuition, especially the first contacts. And Arel, I know you're a speaker. I'm a speaker as well. Whenever I see speakers and they just talk about how awesome they are, the less I like them.
Right.
It's like anybody can get up there and tell how awesome they are. And we hear, especially today in today's marketing and soundbite days, it's great to hear how great people are, but it's also when people are vulnerable. So when people show vulnerability, that creates intimacy. And the only way intimacy is created, and I'm sure we know through intimacy, is likability. Likability, relationships, and intimacy are all connected. When I show up and I'm vulnerable, then that's when the connection is made. So that's when I talk about myself. I've had some tough times. I've drugs, alcohol, divorce, things have not always been awesome for me because I'm like you. We all go through these ups and downs, and that's what I wanted to show is there's a connection. And if I would just talk about how great I am, it just people's intuition is like, hey, something's not right. Hey, this person's not like me. So vulnerability is the first thing that I really want to get into and talk about as a pillar for likability.
Now, when we talk about vulnerability, how deep are we when we say we need to be vulnerable? Like when I meet someone and they say, hey, how's your day? Should I be like, man, my wife just left me. It's a bad day. Like how do we know what's the appropriate amount of vulnerability and how much is having someone drink from a fire hose?
Yes, that's a great question to bring up. And we can, for this conversation, we can link authenticity and vulnerability because I think that's good because, there's a healthy way to be vulnerable and authentic and then there's an unhealthy way. And you're right. And this is something that you, I may go back to this word a lot, you can experiment with because it's hard to give a hard and fast rule for this. But what's also good is to think about, when you first meet somebody, and we talk about, I know a lot of your listeners, you are salespeople, you're managers, etc. We have a lot of these first contacts that we have, whether it's being introduced to a prospect, being introduced to a coworker, whoever it is. And somebody suggested to me, and I think this is great, to have a couple pre-thought of stories about yourself that are a couple sentences long. When I say stories, this is sort of an intro that you can pull out that talk about your vulnerability and get the conversation started. Because, we meet people all the time. And it's like, hey, how are you? Where do you live? Blah, 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 which is great, but that's surface level. But I really enjoy having deep conversations with people. And with deep conversations, especially with somebody you first met, oftentimes you want to tell a story that shows that you're not perfect without the. Does that make sense?
I love the idea of it. I think it makes a lot of sense. Let's wrap our teeth, or let's get concrete with it. Can you give me an example of, we're going to go and have an introduction to someone new, you're going to meet them. What might one of these stories sound like?
Well, the story I give about myself is a great idea of one because I can say, look, I've been successful, but I wasn't happy. So right there, I'm showing vulnerability. Like, look, I've been good at the scoreboard of life, and I talk to a lot of business owners, so I'm establishing credibility, I'm establishing the connection, I'm like them, and then I'm saying, look, I didn't have any joy and fulfillment. To be honest, I was drinking a lot and doing a lot of drugs. And so, I'm doing a couple things there. I'm showing that I have some connection to them sort of status-wise and position-wise, and then I may be saying something that they've always wanted to talk to somebody about, but a lot of people don't bring up. And even if they're not in that position, they're like, whoa, this guy's he has the courage to tell somebody. And I'm not going in, I'm not doing it in a pity way to pity me, or I'm not doing it like I'm broke away. I'm stating a fact, and I'm doing it in an authentic way, because I absolutely did go through these things.
Now, help me understand, and I want to make sure that we truly get the flow of how this would actually work. How soon are you introducing this into a conversation? So if it's you and me, and I'm like, hey, Michael, I'd love for you to meet my friend, Dwayne. Dwayne is a successful business owner. He owns 10 ice cream shops in town. He's one of my best friends. Dwayne, I want you to meet Michael. This guy's an awesome speaker and author. I think you two would hit it off. Like how fast do we start? I mean, like, what's the transition into those vulnerability points?
Well, I have a master's degree in vulnerability, so I go into it right away. I've had a lot of practice. I've really worked on, I've done a lot of work on the relationship with myself, as we say. And some of this is following your own intuition. Mm-hmm. And there are some people where they're not making eye contact with me. I can tell by their stance. Sometimes, it's not right to pull this out. So it's really me checking in with myself and really in the flow of the conversation. I know, Arel, you did a great podcast on presence. Mm-hmm. I believe when we're very present, we can really gauge the situation. And that's one of when we're present, we're in the flow of the situation, we really can we can be very likable and develop these relationships very quickly. And that's why we want to have, and when I say a couple of these soundbite, these stories, we don't necessarily need to know them word by word, which I think comes off as unauthentic, but we want to give a little bit of vulnerability and see what the other person does with it too. So, I'm giving some facts about myself. They're somewhat vulnerable. I'm not going into long stories, and I'm going to see how they react to that. And if they don't react to that, I'm not going to go further. But if they're like, oh, wow, that's really interesting, can you tell me more about that? And if they're really like, they're dropping down into they're making good eye contact, then I will go deeper. So it's a very, be present, be in the flow of the conversation type of thing.
Well, I mean, that's a really great point. So you're saying you kind of do an experiment, if you will, of what is this a good time? Let me try now. It doesn't work. Or I said it, the person looks down or they seem distant. Maybe I need to pump the brakes a little bit. So really kind of having playing with it a little bit to see when it works best for you is a good way to actually try this.
It is. And if you're talking about people that are maybe earlier in their journey of a career, for example, I used to own some get cold called all the time, and people would say, "Oh, I'm a financial advisor. I just like to get to know you." I mean, literally, I'd pick up the phone and it's, "Hey, I'm Bob from bank, whatever bank.
Yeah,
I'm a financial advisor, so I help business owners like you. I just would like to get to know you."
Right.
Like, what do you want to go on a date with me? I don't understand what do you mean? But that's very inauthentic, and so I did not like this person because I'm like, look, if you want to sell me something, tell me what you're selling. Let's have an honest conversation. I can deal with that, but I don't understand. Have a coffee to get to know you. That's you're not being authentic. And if somebody come up to me at a networking event and they say, "Hey, Michael, I'm just getting into software sales. To be honest, I have a great attitude, but I'm a little intimidated because I never did it before. Can you share some stuff with me? Or I'd like to talk to you about so-and-so, but, I'll be honest, I'm newer in the industry." I really would connect to that person. I would like that person. I would say, look, you're being very authentic and vulnerable. That's the type of person that I want to be around. I will talk to you.
Now, how does one overcome the fear of, well, I don't want to say that because what if my boss finds out that, I think I'm not ready, or there's this fear. I tend to know, and I want to address this because I'm not exactly sure how to formulate this question, but I think it's an important one. There's like an unwritten rule that once someone becomes successful, it's a lot easier for them to admit those areas of vulnerability. Like, so I can look into the past and say, hey, here's these things that happened to me that were difficult, but I've overcome them and I'm in a better place now, but they happened to me. Whereas if it's currently happening, it's a lot more difficult for someone to be honest about. It's easier for me to say, if I was, let's say, divorced and then remarried and happy, to be able to talk about the divorce now versus if I'm actually right now today dealing with that struggle. How does one either change or overcome or deal with that feeling of, I don't want to make myself seem inferior, and it's difficult for me to talk about this currently versus that confidence of talking about something that was in the past? How do we approach that idea?
Well, let's start with, because I think I want to explore this. Is great to explore and dig into because I think people are going to get more out of it. Let's talk about it first from the salesperson's point of view and then from the personal point of view. Does that make sense?
I love it. Let's do it.
Okay, so from the salesperson's point of view, again, say they're selling to me as a business owner and they're 25, 27 years old, and again, I get these people very young in their career saying, "Hey, they're coming at me with a false confidence," and I think if we talk about bringing the vulnerability, they're like, "Yeah, I work with business owners all the time. I coach business owners." I'm like, "Look, you're only 25 years old. I'm not saying that's impossible, but I really am." Then I'm into checking the facts, and then I have this wariness about them,
Yeah.
If they say, and again, your languaging is very important, because if they say, "Hey, I'm not that good at this yet," I don't want to hear that. If they say, "I'm relatively new, I'm willing to learn," that I respect.
Mm-hmm.
If they're coming in with a learning mindset, if they say, "Hey, I may not be as established as some other people you deal with," that's a true statement.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to meet them where they are, but I can only meet them where they are if they're very authentic and my BS meter, my intuition doesn't start going off, because I get a lot of people coming at me wanting to sell me stuff when I own a business. And the number one thing that's up is my BS meter, where they're trying to shove stuff down my throat with scripts and everything else.
Right, right. So feeling like someone is saying, "Hey, I'm new to the game. I'm, doing my best to learn." Now, does let's say from the sales perspective, before we go into the personal, do you think that's an effective approach if someone is saying, "Hey, I'm new in town. I really don't know a lot of business owners, and I'm trying to establish a client base, and I'd love to talk to you about it." Is that an approach that you think is a good way to make that connection, or is there a better way?
Well, I like the first part of it. What I would say is, hey, I realize your time is valuable, because you just started talking about you, which is okay to start it with you, but then you want to focus on the other person. So I would start saying, "Hey, I'm new in town. I'm trying to establish my booking business," and then shift the conversation. Look, I know a little bit about you. I've researched you, and I'm very impressed with your network, and I know your time is ultra valuable. So I'm going to ask you a question. You're welcome to say yes or no. Would it be possible, and I would really appreciate it, if I could just buy you a coffee? I'll bring lunch to your office if you could just spend 15 minutes to a half an hour with me, because I know you're going out of your way. Let me know what I can do to repay you for this favor.
Now, you don't think that feels too like, will someone invite you into their office and they don't know you? Is that too big of an ask? Is it worth taking that kind of risk for the person who's just getting started and really trying to get their feet comfortable? Is there a place where something is too much, or is there a place where it's like, well, just, hey, throw your cards on the table and let's see what the other person plays?
Well, I think it depends on what you're asking for. If you're asking for, what I would tell people earlier in their career, or actually any time in their career, is to find a mentor. Mm-hmm. And people want to help other people, especially people that have been there. I mean, I mentor people, Aurel, I can imagine you mentor people, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And it's like, we've been through this, and to see somebody, young with all this energy, it really, it engages me. And, we'll talk about service if we get there later, but this is me being of service to them, which gives me more energy. And I learn when I help teach as well. And so if it's somebody looking for a mentor, I would absolutely just reach out. I would send a personalized note. I would call the person. I would find out where the person, is a networking. And I said, "Sir, I'm really impressed by you. I'm looking for a mentor. I'm sure somebody's helped you out in your time. Is there any way you'd mentor me, or how could we make that work? And I'm really respectful of your time, but how could we make that work?" I bet you would get a 50% hit.
Yep. And I think you've touched something that I don't want people to gloss over either, because it's a very valuable key, that you've done research on this person before you contact them. A lot of times people will reach out to someone, whether it's a client or a mentor or whomever, and they're throwing spaghetti against the wall. They don't know anything about it. And if someone knows that you've listened, that you've cared, that you've, done enough time to research them, I think that actually helps with the authenticity side of it, because it shows you're not just saying, "Hey, I want to get to know you." You're saying, "I've already done some research, and based on what I've done, I'm really impressed." There's a little bit more authenticity to that. Do you find that the research component is overlooked, done right? Do you have any insights into that idea of what research of an individual should be like before you contact them? I want to delve into that idea of doing your homework before contacting someone, so we can have some specific steps we could take in our process as we move forward.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And instead of finding 20 people, the names of 20 people to mentor you or to sell to or whatever you're trying to do, pick 5 and really do research. Because people, again, I'm speaking as a business owner. I started 3 international software companies and run them. And I would get calls all the time or emails on LinkedIn, and they would say, "Hey, I can really help you with my new marketing platform." And I'd say, "Well, what can you help me with?" And sometimes they'll be like, "Marketing." Well, what can you do? Like, did you see something I'm not doing? Is there something in my messaging? Have you worked with companies like me? And if I would get a call and somebody say like, "Hey, Mike, I helped the company like this and this and this. Is this a problem you're going through? Because I looked at your website. It seems you have multi-offices, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, okay, because I just get tired of the shotgun approach. And there's so many people that just like, it's a numbers game. I'll contact 3,000 people and 0.1 will say yes. I'm not going to be one of those 0.1s. I'm going to be, you pick 10, you do your research on them. And that's and come to me with a, know you can solve my problem, or making that connection, or being authentic. And that's where the connection is made.
So you're saying that you can find a way to find something that someone is passionate about, whether it's a charity or something you can donate, and donate in their honor as a way of thanking them or appreciating the work that they're doing for you. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a lot different than giving a gift. It's gifts with this level. You really don't give gifts very often, and it really. If you say, hey, I see you work with the Boys and Girls Club, I'd be happy to make a donation or volunteer some work. I mean, I'll tell you, if you want to be endeared by somebody in a high level, that's probably the quickest, easiest way to do it.
Yeah, that's very, very valuable, because it's tying into something they're passionate about. It's giving, it's spreading out the love and joy of your relationship. So that's really powerful. I really love that concept. So now let's go into the personal side of things. We talked about how to approach mentors on the sales and the business side. Let's talk about this idea of vulnerability on a personal side. How do I, if I'm just trying to get more friends, or maybe there's a special someone I kind of want to, catch their eye, a lot of times we don't think vulnerability, we don't go to vulnerability as our go-to, choice, because we don't want the person to think we're a loser or, not the best version of ourselves. How does vulnerability differ or remain the same when we're dealing with personal relationship building?
Well, I think that when you show vulnerability and then you show your reaction to that, or how you're holding that in your consciousness, I think that's what shows leadership, and that shows likability. Like if you say, I am going through a divorce, and, to be honest, it is tough. But, what I'm doing about it is I'm working out a lot. I really have the intention to have this be a relationship that we continue with as friends. Then it's like I'm giving a lot of information about me personally that is deep information. I'm showing that, that I'm going through this tough time, but I can have a positive attitude through it. And that I'm trying to make sure that things are good on all sides, which speaks volume about my character. And again, people can tell you by how you deliver this information about how true it is in your own life.
Now, what if someone says, I can't have I'm in a really bad place right now. Like, I can't, help me. How can I look at my situation more positively? From your experience on understanding, psychology and how people think, if someone is running into a stumbling block within themselves that they can't find something good about a situation, or they don't know how to spin it in that moment, what could someone do? What's an experiment someone can take to help them maybe find the brighter side, find the good, so that they can put into practice what you just said?
Yeah, well, if you are, it is a muscle that you develop over time. But if you are going through a place, if you are going through a time in your life where you are in a depression, and I'll say this because I am, and you are, and we all are these type of people that go for it in our lives. And when we go for it, that means we achieve some really great things, and sometimes we fail. And we have to be very cognizant that as the creators of in this world, that we're going to have ups and downs. And so, Arel, what you said, it's very important that we understand, we're honest with ourselves and honest when we're at a low point in our life. This may be a little off topic for your podcast, but when I talk to executives, they all sort of nod their head. And this is something that a lot of people don't talk about. But I've been through depressions where I would not get out of bed. I would wake up, and it would be a Tuesday, and I would not want to go into work, and I would call in and say that I'm sick, and I would just pull the covers over my head because, I just do not want to deal with that day. And a lot of people that take on a lot of pressure have done this. And I do some blog posts, and normally when I speak to executives, I throw this in because I think it's sort of a public service announcement for people like us, where if you find yourself down in the dumps, this is the time to really to go through some steps. And the couple steps are live healthy. So if you drink and do drugs, these are the time to not go get wasted, because you're going to want to, because you're going to want to escape and forget things. This is a time to lay off the substances, because they really they'll bring you up, but they'll really bring you lower down. And that includes food. This is not the time to binge eat. You want to eat a healthy meal. And then you want to go do some exercise. And if you're really having a tough time with something and you really focus on some of these physical things, it can really bring you in a better place very quickly. But then the next thing to do, and I know this is sometimes the hardest time to do this, is reach out to a friend. And this is a time to reach out to a close friend, a family member, and say, hey, look, I'm going through a tough time. Can you just talk to me? And if anybody ever reaches out to you and they're going through a tough time, you just want to be with them and be present with them. This is not the time to fix them. This is not the time to give them advice. So this is the time when a friend is really in a low point, is get together with them, spend time, and just listen. And I know it's going to be uncomfortable. I know you're going to want to tell them what to do, but when they're at their lowest point, this is not the time to fix. They just need to get stuff out, and they just need a friend. And you may not say a word, and it may be uncomfortable. Maybe you may not know what to say. It's okay. Just sit there and love them, and just be there as their friend and their family. So, sorry, a little bit of a public service announcement, Arel, but
no, I think it's beautiful. I've done a lot of studying into empathy and the empathetic response, and how, there's a great phrase that I has just guided me in the last, I'd say, year or so since I learned it, is that when someone's drowning, that's not the time to give swimming lessons. So, like when someone is in their worst spot, you're not like, kick your legs more, you'll be fine. Like, pull them to shore, get them safe. And then, when the time is right, start giving a swimming lesson. So I'm a huge proponent in the empathetic response. Can I use that when somebody's drowning, don't give them swimming lessons? Do I have permission to use that? I didn't come up with it, so feel free to. I don't know who came up with it, but it's one of those posts you see on Instagram that you think are beautiful. So totally use it and spread the good word, though. So, but all right. So let me say this. All right. So you say you should reach out to people, and that's one of the toughest things to do. What about? Is this the time where you should be doing service and helping people, or is this the time where you should be getting from people? What's your thoughts on the idea of service and how this helps us become more engaged in liking ourselves?
Well, that's a great thing. And so what I mean by service is that means providing value to others. And when we talk about true service, this is when I provide value and don't expect anything back. Mm-hmm. And I had one of my main teachers in my life. She said that the three places where our soul ascends are when one is meditation, 2 is clearing out psychological unresolved issues, and 3 is being of service. So when we're there just to help people out, that's one of the most divine. If you choose to believe in God, that's one of the closest things we can do to really get in touch with our God and our soul. And when we're of service, when we're providing value to others, it seems like value comes back. And when you're out there and the best people I've ever seen in business go out and they help people just for the sake of helping people with no expectations of ever getting anything back. Right. And these are the people that have the huge book of business that they call you up, and it's almost like they're calling you to ask you what they can do for you, and you're like, what's the catch? And there's no catch. And it's almost, to me, I'm like, man, this is weird at points, but these people just genuinely care about other people. And I think when you go through this life, Arel, and you just really care about other people, that other people are going to care about you. And it may not be the first time you care about them, it may not be the second time, but sooner or later, that care and that love is going to come back.
So now let's talk about how we figure out how to do the care and how to do that love. I know one of the challenges that people might have is they hear this idea of, I should do things for people and I should be of service. And then, I've run into people who I'll meet them and they'll say, hey, Arel, how could I be of service to you? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I have no idea. Like, I don't know how to answer that question because I don't know what you can do. I haven't thought about what I need. How do we preempt and figure out how we can be of best help for someone that we just meet? Or, how do we choose people in our vast, Facebook friends and how do we figure out what's the best way we could be of service of someone that's not going to feel like we're just a sneaky salesperson or we're just trying to backdoor some benefit for ourselves? How do we figure out that service we should give for someone?
Yeah, and I like what you said, because when you just go to somebody, you say, "Hey, how can I help you?" or "How can I be of service?" It's too broad. Well, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, right? So, but I like what you brought up, and the fact of I have a very good friend. He's a very powerful coach, and what he does is he'll oftentimes have a conversation with somebody about coaching, and he will put a half an hour in his calendar just to think about what he wants to send them, whether it's a book, it's a quote, it's a process to do. So this is, when in essence, this person's a prospect he meets, he will actually think for half an hour how he can add value to their life, and just so say you meet that really important person that could really move your life forward. Well, are you going on LinkedIn? Maybe he's I saw you come from, I think you're in Syracuse, Arel, is that right?
Yeah.
So if he has a Derek Coleman signed jersey that you can get your hands on, because I'm an old basketball player,
Sure.
Send him that. It's like, but that's the thoughtfulness, and that's the authenticity, and that's the service. And you send it to him, you just send it to him. Not you send it to him, can I have a phone call with you? Because then it's like a barter. That's not service.
Right.
And look on LinkedIn. What's their things on LinkedIn? Look at their company website. Who can potentially you connect them to? And again, you have to do it from this place of, will this be of value? And if it's the intro, ask them. Hey, I know this other person, and my initial thought is this would be a good introduction. Can you verify if this would be a good introduction for you or not? So you're getting their buy-in, and because I hate to get introduced to people that may not be that I know is going to be a mismatch. So those are some great things. I love sending books to people. I love, even if it's just a handwritten card with a quote in it. There's just so many different creative ways we can do to really brighten somebody's day and be of service to them in some part of their life.
Yeah, and I love the idea of the consciousness towards the giving. The same way I have to schedule a doctor's appointment or whatever it might be, let me schedule 30 minutes to think, hey, I just met this individual. How can I, what can I do? And I think LinkedIn is a great resource for getting to know people on their professional side of what they care about, what they, choose to put out there. It's a little bit more public in terms of, there's a lot of privacy issues with sites like Facebook and so on and so forth. So I think LinkedIn is a great way to find out what people's goals are in their professional life, and then ask yourself, who could I introduce them to? What could I do? And one of the things that this is a personal mantra of my, or a personal philosophy of mine. I can't give any kind of verifiable sources if this works, but when I send gifts to people, I do my best to not include business cards. I've received a lot of things from people, and there's always like the business card in there. And for me, when I receive that business card, I kind of feel like it's a little bit businessy or transactional. I feel like maybe someone to say, here's 2 business cards, one for you and one to give to someone, if you really liked the gift I gave you or something. And I just always feel like a little cheap when that happens to me. And my mentality is, if I'm sending someone something, they know who I am, they know what I do. Let the gift be just of giving. Let it be of service. Are there any little things that you could think of that people do wrong with the idea of service or the idea of giving or whatever we want to call this idea of just being of value to others, that they may think is common and is what they should do, but you see it and it makes you cringe, or it makes you just like, oh gosh, why do they do this? Is there anything that jumps out to you like that?
It's funny you mentioned that, Arel. You're good, man, because when I was running the software company in San Diego, I would get, we all know the ADP, the payroll processing company, right?
Yeah.
So, they're pretty relentless, sales and marketing. Not saying good or bad, this is just my experience. But they would send me cute gifts every 2 months. And they would always have like this place for the sales manager to write their name. And the sales manager would scribble their name and scribble a note so quickly. I didn't know what the note said, and I didn't know what their thing said. So I know what happened is they probably bought 500 of these for every office in the United States, they send him these sales manager, I got to do this. So he would scribble it as quick as he can. I get through him. So he's probably, heading to happy hour or whatever it is. So it really diminished, and actually it turned me off. I'm like, well, this, why even do this if I can't even read his note and they don't even have time for that?
Right.
That's a turnoff. And what's also interesting is I was profiled in San Diego's Business Journal. They had a big profile on me. And I got this email out of nowhere. Like every other software CEO, I get 1 billion emails a day. This is from some guy's Gmail account. It says, hey, Michael, I saw your profile in the Business Journal because I talked about spirituality and stuff. And he goes,
yeah,
hey, you seem like a pretty centered guy. And I just reached out to you. I thought it might be interesting to have coffee. And it said Steve and had his phone number.
Yeah.
And I was like, it sat in my inbox for like 2 or 3 days, which nothing sits in my inbox for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And I ended up calling him and having coffee. He's my good friend now. But it was written just like, he's like, just put it out there. And, we hang out every 2-3 weeks. And, he's for years now. And it just, because it was just him talking. It wasn't, it was just neat.
Yeah. So, and I love the idea of just kind of putting it out there. I think a lot of times people are afraid to be their authentic self. And if that person wrote that, clearly it was from their authentic self. It hit for you. It worked. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And to me, what we talk about is when I speak, I like to talk about overcoming fear, resistance to procrastination. And to do that, we actually have to be okay with failure.
Mm.
And that means when you put yourself out authentically, some people that's not right for it. And it's not that you're wrong. It's that you and that person are wrong at this time for the relationship. So, and that's why we call it an experiment, because there is no failing with an experiment. You only fail in an experiment of not trying it. So your experiment is seeing what works for you at that time. And some are going to work out and some aren't.
Right. You got to say that again, because that was good. I really, really like that. Say what you just said about the failure of an experiment. Say that again. That was so good.
You only fail in an experiment by not conducting it. So the next time you have that person that you don't want to call, that you are procrastinating or you have fear about it, literally tell yourself, I'm going to experiment with it this way. I'm going to experiment by just saying, hey, I'm Mike, I'm new, and I'd like to have coffee with you. That's your experiment. And then try it. And then if it doesn't work, don't do it again.
Now, do you have any, I'm just curious, do you have any rules of thumb of like, I know Brian Tracy, who, endorsed your book, and I'm a big fan. I've met and spoke with Brian a few times. He says he always tries something at least 5 times before he calls it quits, because, the first time you do it, you may not know what you're doing. You may bumble over yourself. But by the 5th time, if it doesn't work, abandon ship. It's a bad thing. Do you have any guides to experiments on when it's time to call this experiment? I've found my results, I'm good, or when do you keep pushing forward?
It's interesting you bring that up, Arel, because I'm working with I've done a lot of, work on myself and self-help, self-development. I'm at the point where I'm working with a lady, and she's my intuitive coach. And I believe that if we can get that in touch with our intuition, that'll actually tell us right away whether we should go forward with something or not. And so if you're talking about, I guess and I know what Brian's saying, and Brian's a great guy, and this is just another take on it, that if we really check in and we're really present with ourselves, and again, when we check in with ourselves, we need silence. So that might be going for a walk without any headphones or your phone or whatever and thinking about something. When we check in with ourselves, oftentimes, if not all the time, our consciousness will tell us whether that's the right thing to do or not.
So really looking inward and saying, what do I feel is right? Do I need to give this another try? Did I really give it my best effort? Let's go again. Or no, I didn't. Let's call it a day. Is that where we're going with it?
Exactly. And we have to be careful because there's 2 inner voices we have. One's our intuition, one's our ego.
Oh.
So our ego is always all about power, control, money, cars, men and women, partners, whatever that is, conquests, all those other things. That's what the ego is about. And the ego is okay. It's for a whole nother longer conversation, but oftentimes give us an inner dialogue. But when we can quiet the ego and we can really tune into that inner knowing, and that'll tell us. And sometimes it will our ego will say yes, and our intuition says no. Oh my gosh! Every time I've ever not listened to my intuition, I did it like 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, I know better.
Right.
It didn't work out, and I tell you, when we can get to that place, the more we are in touch with that inner voice. And again, we have to. It's there for all of us. We just have to quiet down all the other stimuli. It's just such a beautiful thing, and it will guide us. It will guide you.
Now, can you give me, I know this is a deep topic, but I want to just touch it very quickly. How do I know when I'm listening to my ego, or how do I know when I'm listening to my intuition?
Yeah, I hear you. And the ego is like, I want to achieve something. The ego is, I want to make that amount of money. I want to get that account. I want that because it's going to make me look better, feel better, etc. And the intuition, it just is. And the intuition, you may want to sign this big deal, but your intuition is like, no, this is going to be more problems than it's worth. And again, is that intuition or is that fear? So ego can also send fear our way as well. And I wish I had a better explanation of that, Earl, but
yeah.
If it was that easy, I wouldn't need a spiritual coach myself, right?
Well, you know what? I think there's so many different experiments we can actually take on, asking ourselves, were we listening to the fear or the ego, or were we listening to, that still positive voice? And I think that there are tons of experiments we can do. And I mean, gosh, there's so many experiments that we can, I love this concept of, all right, now I want to go out there, I want to try this. And it's not me attempting something, I'm experimenting with something. So now tell me more. We're coming to the end of our time here, but I know you have this great book that goes into a lot more details on how people can discover ways to manage stress and achieve a work-life balance with your book, The Experiment. Tell me a little bit more about, what I can expect from the book and where I can find it if I wanted to pick up a copy.
Yeah, the best place is on Amazon, and the website is experimenttoday.com. And I get so many books, and so I wanted to really get this out there. And I thought, how can I get this out there in a fun way, in a quick way? And so it's about 150 pages, and it's a business fable. So it's a story about a business owner who's drinking too much, he's living an unhealthy life, he's separated from his spouse, he's going through relationship problems at work from his employees, and one other one specifically. And he goes and he meets a coach on a train in like a chance meeting, and it follows through a couple of sessions. So it's a real easy read. Probably take you 2 hours to get through. There's a lot of there's notes, there's exercises if you choose to do the exercises, and it's teaching some of these fundamental emotional intelligence skills and tools in a really quick, easy to read, semi-fun story. And Pete, it's funny, Arel, because people ask me, are you like the main character, or are you the coach? And I'm like, well, I'm sort of both, because my life is some of both of them. And it really teaches a lot about leadership, authenticity, vulnerability, how to be kinder to ourselves, how to bring more balance into our lives, how to stop stressing and have so much anxiety, how to really go for it in life. So there's a lot of little stuff in this little book. I'm really proud of it.
That's awesome. And if I want to get more engaged in the book's content and finding out what Michael Anderson has to say, what's the best way for me to stay in touch with you and find out all the cool stuff you got going on?
Absolutely. So it's experimenttoday.com. So it's experimenttoday.com. And then my main site is executivejoy.com. Again, that's executivejoy.com. And I'll tell you what, if any of your readers, I hope this is okay, Arel, but if any of your readers buy the book and then they send me an email through executivejoy.com, I'll send them it's an audio, it's a procrastination toolbox. It's 5-minute audio that will really get your butt up and moving. Is it okay if I offer that? Now that I've already offered that.
No, I think I totally am all about great bonuses and value. So if you're listening to this and you love it, go ahead and go to executivejoy.com, send an email to Michael and his team with the receipt, and you'll get this really cool, who doesn't want to get over procrastination? So I think it's fantastic that they can have this opportunity, and thank you for doing that. Well, listen, y'all, I want you to go out there and experiment with some likability. I want you to ask yourself, what are the different experiments I can take for giving service to people? Maybe how do I become more vulnerable when I first introduce myself to someone? Experiment with what you can say and how you can really find that authentic self so that you're being of service, you're caring about others, and you're letting yourself be vulnerable, because that's how we really connect. And if it doesn't work, you get to do another experiment. How exciting is that? And if it does work, you get to share your results and do the experiment over and over and over again. So please, build your relationships and build your awesome experiments, because if you do that, I'm confident that you'll have better relationships and more success. And if you have more success, you'll have more happiness. And if you don't want more success and happiness, why'd you just spend an hour with us? You could have been doing something completely different. But I know that you want more, and I know that's why you keep listening to the show. So I thank you so much for taking your time to be here, to listen to this valuable long content that we have with Michael Anderson. I hope that if you like this episode, let me know what you think. Make sure to go on iTunes and go on Stitcher. Leave written reviews. This is one of the best ways for me to get direct feedback from you. Shoot me an email at info@artoflikability.com. Hit me up on Facebook or Twitter. Let me know what your thoughts are. I respond to every single message I get because I like you so much, people. So hit me up. Let me know what you think. If you want to connect with Michael, definitely check out executivejoy.com and check out the book. Sending you all a big old high five. Now, Michael, I'm going to send you a high five first. You can't see it, but you can feel it. Here it is. Bam! That was for you. And now sending a big old high five to all of my family out there. You are awesome.
Thanks for listening to The Art of Likability. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast for more awesome info on how you can improve your likability and improve your life. Until next time, remember,